All right, we are now recording. This is our PowerSchool attendance calculation update where we are now including remote student times in the daily attendance calculation. Let me start off by saying that this video should be used for training purposes only, that no real students, staff, or any information is being shared on any real person, as we are using a sandbox server full of fake students and fake information, and any likeness to any student or person is purely coincidental. So one of our most requested items, with all of the adjustments that we've had made to the attendance calculation so that we could get that daily code to map over from our meeting attendance, is the fact that some of us do use remote enrollments for students, and that time was not taken into account when the daily attendance calculation looked across all the minutes of the day. So anybody who was still running a remote school, and we see it quite a bit in our upper schools, career tech centers, we see them in alternative schools, situations such as that. It would not take into consideration whatever classes was over there in the total time of the day. And so anybody in those situations was having to still manually correct those daily attendance codes and have that communication from the two schools about how much time a student had missed. Well, in the update that went out this weekend, we now are looking across all the minutes across a student's schedule, which will include remote minutes. In addition to that update, there were two other updates. One was a bug issue where we were seeing attendance codes need to be used, and it was trying to put the wrong code from the wrong school in there. It was some back-end ID issues. That has been fixed. And there's actually been a third update that went into it, which is now allowing you as a district to choose partial day present codes that you would like to see written as a daily code. So what I'm going to do is actually start out with that part of the update first and show you a new place that you can decide as a district whether you want to set this portion up. Remember that attendance preferences have to be set at the individual school level, so this is something you would need to look at on a school by school basis. So I'm at my Alabama High School instance right here. I'm going to go into school management, under attendance, and under attendance preferences. At the very bottom of the attendance preference page is where you will see all of our plug-in details, our daily attendance calculation settings. Everyone should already have the checkbox with it enabled. Everyone should already have the percent threshold for absence set to 49% because that's the most amount of time a student can miss. If they miss any time above that, that's what constitutes the absence in the state. And then we have our default tardy codes. Some have it set to TE, some have it set to TU. That's a personal preference. That code is really only used when it cannot distinguish some type of code category for your absence codes that you are placing in. So very rarely is that code used. But you do have some new settings down here that I want to explain. So one of the, I'm not going to say it's an issue, but one of the comments that we saw from a lot of districts or heard from a lot of districts is that, especially during football season, we see it a lot. Let's say that you have the kids who are going to an away game, and so you've marked all of the students, maybe third and fourth periods, that they've gone on a field trip or a school activity, and it was not writing that code over to the daily side. So the code prior to today was only looking when you had minutes missing from an overall day within a kid. Well, when a kid has gone to a field trip or a school activity, you're not actually performing a checkout because you don't want minutes to be subtracted for the day, because these are present codes constituting the student is still fulfilling their instructional obligations for the school day. And so there was no way to kind of code off of a logical minutes missed as to where a code should go on the daily side. So what we have done is said, if the districts want that code to write over to the daily code instead of just the default present code, because in all aspects that the state's eyes look at attendance, a school activity, a field trip, and a present code are all the same thing. It's all a present value. It's all a DAV value of 1. The kid gets credit for being at school that day. If the district wants to see that code as an overall daily code instead of the default present, here is where they would enter it in. So if you're a district that says, okay, if I put a student as being on a school activity or a field trip or any of the other present codes for a partial absence or for an overall no minutes missed day, I want you to write it over to the daily side. The way that you code those in, it's very specific. You use the single quote. You put the code. So here is our code for school activity. In this one, I'm saying allow these present codes to write over to the daily side if you see them entered on a day where no minutes at all have been missed. So this would be like your football team leaving during third period and being gone the rest of the day. There's not a check in, check out. They still have the whole number of minutes for the entire day there, but you want this code to also write over to the entire daily code. You also have a secondary option, which is to allow any present code that you put right here to be written on partial absence days. So you might want to think about this one. We gave this as an option. Not sure how many is going to take advantage of this. So this would be if I did have a student to have a partial absence. So it saw some amount of minutes absent, but not enough to be considered an actual absence code. So maybe it's a kid who checked into school 10 minutes late, so they have a tardy, but then they were on that football trip, and so they want have an essay down there. That's where you need to make the decision. Do you want to be able to allow this right here in your district to write that present code over to the day side with minutes missing? Typically, you wouldn't want to do that. We added it in there in case there was a use case scenario for that. Another option down here, which has been there for a while, but we really haven't talked about it, is this bypass admin verification. So this is where if you wanted to just do the background DAC calculation for you without you having to hit that screen of submit that I'm going to show you later, you can check so that it automatically just goes inside of there. And then lastly, we have our bypass daily to meeting sync. So this is a two-way calculation. This is where if I'm in my meeting side, I'm using those minutes to push it over to the daily. Some people have gone in and adjusted daily manually, and it pushes it to all of the meeting minutes. It also goes backwards. Some people don't want that. They want to be able to adjust this, but this was really before these two came in, these two right here. This is if you want to not have on the daily pushback to meeting. Honestly, if you keep going with what our best practice is, where you write everything in meeting and let it roll to daily, you'll never even use this bottom one down here. So new feature right here, this one right here is pretty much where the majority of the state is going to take advantage. Some might choose to choose this. Once you get those settings decided and hit submit, let's go into how this is actually being impacted in the servers now. So what I want to do is start out with the whole, how am I looking at my minutes now with remote enrollments involved? Some people might be on the call and go, Stacy, what even is this remote enrollment that you talk about? So I want to start kind of back up to the beginning and actually put a remote enrollment in for a student so that you see it go in there, see how it adjusts the number of minutes and what we're going to do with this. So I'm actually going to go to another student right quick and go to my second favorite, Wednesday Adams, right after our Mickey Mouse. And I want to look at her bell schedule. So if I go to courses and programs and look at the bell schedule, notice my bell schedule here. I have 3 periods, but I have an open time right here. Well, during this open time, it just so happens that this student goes over to another school of ours and takes another course. So this could be very similar to you have students at a high school that maybe go over to a career tech center during the day to take their courses. So you would have these open blocks. Now, I do know that some districts have created what I'm going to call the schedule filler courses so that they get a full view of time inside of there for daily attendance calculations. You'll now need to make the decision of whether you want to leave that in there or take that out, because now you don't need to account for that time because the daily attendance calculation will account for it for you. So I'm going to remote enroll this student in another class at another school in the district. So I'm going to go to courses and programs, and under registration, you see this remote and summer school registration. When I click that link, it's going to bring me to the remote enrollment screen. So I want to pick first the school where it's at. So this is going to be at our learning center that I have scoped up. And if I go to type physical education, I have a physical education grade 7, I just passed it, full that I actually want to go into. So I'm going to pick this course right here. So once I have the course selected, I only have this one section. I'm going to choose this section and say that I'm enrolling them as of, we can use today's date, and hit submit. Okay, student enrollment saved. So if I go to courses and programs and go to list schedule, I now see that I have all of the classes over here, but now I have this additionally. Notice the period looks a little different because my periods are structured very differently at that other school than at this school right here. So I now have a remote enrollment on this student. Someone just asked, if we have schedule fillers in the student schedules, will it affect those remote enrolled students? Will we need to remove the schedule fillers for those students? So Jennifer, it will compile all the minutes, including that remote one and that one that you built in. So you'll need to make the decision, do you want to keep them or do you want to drop them? Completely up to your district. No problem. And y'all, as we're going along, feel free to type your questions into the chat because we'll answer them in real time. Again, we are recording so that you'll have all these answers to take back and discuss with your team. Shelley, good question. If the schedule filler is not taking attendance, so if you have marked it to remove from ADA, it's not counting those minutes to begin with, so you're perfectly fine to leave those alone. Now, what is this going to look like? So what I want to do is I want to go through the life cycle of a student's schedule and go through and take attendance. And I've got another student I'm going to work with, but a student who's also enrolled in this right here so that you'll be able to see it from that other school. So here is the student that I'm going to look at. So we're going to use Wednesday, but we're also going to throw our Mickey Mouse in here. So let me add him to my current selection. And I want you to look at Mickey. We have a full schedule at the high school. And again, I've got that same 7th grade PE class at that other school. If I go to the Bell schedule, however, notice Mickey's got a full load plus some. Now, I want you to look at the attendance screen. So I'm going to jump to attendance just to show this to you, because we've seen this in the stock product in PowerSchool already. If I look at the attendance screen, we're all very familiar with this, and we're very familiar with these number of minutes right here. This is where we can do our clock ins and clock outs, and where we can look at our total minutes across all the periods at this school and any others. So when I look at the 445 minutes, I see right here, this is 445 from all of these minutes of these 4 classes. Now, let me scroll over to Wednesday. Remember, I have both of them in my student selection. Notice she only has 308 minutes because I'm missing a period here. She's got 308. However, if I were to click into this hyperlink here of that fraction, notice down here at the bottom, I see, oh, at the high school, I have 308 minutes, but I've also scheduled them in a 50-minute class at that learning center school. So really, in total, the whole school day for this student has 358 minutes. So this is what we have changed in the daily attendance calculation, where we're now looking at the entire school day across the district and picking up all those minutes. So as I start taking attendance shortly, you're going to see in the daily attendance calculation all of these minutes being included in here. If I scroll back over to Mickey, you're going to see that same difference. Again, 445 because of the 4 periods here, but if I click into it, you'll see that in actuality, he has 495 minutes in his overall day because 445 are just at the high school and 50 minutes are over at that learning center. So now I want to actually go in to the teacher portal. And I want to show you how this flows through. So the first period of the day, Mickey happens to be in this intro to engineering class. So I'm going to click over in here to take attendance. Again, I'm doing this from the teacher side because I want you to watch the flow of it from the teacher side. If I go into here and I say, here are my students that are absent and here are who are present. So I have Mickey right here. Let's say Mickey is unexcused in this class. So I'm going to hit submit. Remember that circle means now we are writing that daily attendance code over to the daily side. Okay. I am going to sign out from that course. Okay. If I come back over here and refresh, I should see that for today's date, it wrote that first period along with period 2, 3, and 4. If I go over here to daily, notice that it wrote, let me find today's date right here, this Monday. It wrote that same code over to the daily side. Now, what it does not do is it does not write that code over to the remote school. Okay? It does not write that code over to the remote school. So if I were to go in, let me get to my other side. I'm going to go back to the teacher side. I want to log in as that teacher over at the remote school. Now remember, that's a third period class. I'm going to go ahead and log in to show you. Y'all have to excuse me. I got a whole list of test users to remember who's what over here. I'm going to log in because one of the things that I've always heard is that, Stacy, we can't see that code over there, so the teacher doesn't know if they were absent in the other building or not. There is a way to see that, and I want to show you how. So if I look, and I have to find, it was in the MS3, and it was the 7th grade full. So it's in this course right here. If I go to take attendance, and I look at my chart, I want you to look at what happens. So notice that, no, the code did not write over here because it's not going to. We can't pass a code between two schools. That's kind of a hard block in what PowerSchool does. I'm going to use those minutes, but I can't pass the code. But I do have a plugin installed. It's the Record Meeting Attendance Helper, and it will show me if they were marked in their previous courses. So notice I'm at a completely different school. I'm not at the high school. I'm a teacher at the Learning Center who happens to have some kids enrolled in her course from another school, but I can see right here that, hey, this kid was marked absent in the other school. So if this student now comes to me and is here and is present, then I mark them present. Or if they were absent, then I would still need to come over here and mark them absent. So if Wednesday is absent here, but let's say Mickey is here, maybe he's skipping all the classes at the high school and only showing up at the remote school. That could be a possibility. So watch what happens. If I submit, it's going to write, and I'm going to log out, and I'm going to come back over here to attendance. I'm going to go back to the meeting side of Mickey. I'm going to go into this week. Hard to believe we're into November already. And notice, I still have all of these, so it's not going to change these periods. But if I come up here, notice it says I'm still there 50 of the 495 minutes. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, let's say that this student was absent for these 3, but then checks in. So they showed up over at the remote school, and then they come back for the last period of the day because it's football, you know, and if I don't show up to football, I'm not going to play in the game that week. Maybe it's something like that. We all know that how that goes. I'm going to go to clock in right here, and I'm going to say that this student shows up at 1:46. That should put me into that 4th period class. Okay, and it says, hey, they've missed just a teeny tiny bit at the beginning, so he needs to be tardy on that class. Okay, he didn't bring me an excuse, so we're going to say tardy unexcused, and I'm going to hit save. So here is where the change comes in. So remember, I have unexcused, unexcused, unexcused here, and then this tardy. When I hit submit, Look at my number of minutes. Here's where the change is. Previously, it was only using that 445. Now it encompasses the whole 495 and looks at the amount over the overall day. So now I'm seeing a true picture of that daily attendance calculation. And so looking across all the periods at the high school and at the remote school, I see they missed 346 minutes out of a total now of 495 across the district. So he's missed 69% of the time. That's still going to be an unexcused absence, but that's our biggest thing right here, is that we are now encompassing those minutes across the day. Now, as these number of minutes go back and forth, it's going to update this. And this daily attendance calculation is updated each time attendance is taken. So as I were to roll through the rest of the teachers' schedules, it will constantly update and include the number of minutes over at that remote school. So let's think about it like this. Let's pretend that that remote enrollment school was the very first period of the day. Okay, it's going to take and write a daily code based on that number of minutes, and let's say it was a present. When second period comes and goes through, it's going to take that number of minutes and yours and write it over to the daily side. That first period is not going to write automatically, because remember the statement that I made just a minute ago. It's not going to push a code over to the daily side. It's pushing the minutes. So it's going to take the next period being actually taken at the high school for these number of minutes to update. So if that period, again, had been first block, so we've got something there. Let me go back in here and let me log back in as test teacher 5. Actually, let me log back in as the first one and show you what I mean. I'm going to go back and repost attendance and mark him present. Okay, so now it's writing that present code throughout the day. Log out, log back in as the remote teacher. Okay, let me get my 7th grade full. All right, let's say Mickey is absent. Okay, it's writing those minutes, and notice when I looked at it, it did not show any absences. Oh, other than I've got that tardy that I marked a little while ago. Okay, log out, go back to this. Let me refresh this page. Look at the number of minutes. So if I look at the number of minutes altogether, he's there, but nothing has changed on that daily side because I can't write a code. I can write minutes. And just to show you, on that daily side, it is showing that tardy, okay, because it's using the number of minutes across both. So I had that tardy in 4th period. As 2nd period comes along, so now the student was just there for the first period of the day. Now they've come back from the remote school and they're back at their enrollment school. So they went and took their career tech class early in the morning. They're coming back and finishing out the rest of the day. So I'm going to log in as the next teacher. So in this teacher, Mickey is in English Comp 11. So I'm going to come take attendance here. Remember, I haven't seen this student yet in this school, so nothing is pushed down, even though that remote school put in a UA. Well, I see Mickey was marked. Like I can tell over here, they were marked at that other period at the other school. See, there it is right there. Ignore that tardy, is that UA. And I see, sure enough, Mickey is not here. So when I click the UA here and hit submit, it's writing now, because I'm in the enrollment school, it's going to flow the rest of those periods down the rest of the day. So it is going to take still teachers at both sides taking attendance, but it'll keep everything in sync on the admin side now. So if I log out from this teacher, go back to the admin side to show you. If I go back to the meeting, get to the meeting, and go back into this week, you will see that now, remember I logged into second period, and that student was marked absent in my period, and it flowed for the rest of the day. Okay. If I look at the minutes, the number of minutes shows me here, and it says they were here only 205 out of 495. That should be enough that now flips that daily code to be an absence. So if I go check the daily, you will see that now it has an unexcused absence code. So it will keep it in sync on that daily side. The only ones where it won't, and it will take a district to do a manual calculation of the DAC, is if that remote class is the very last period of the day. If that is the case, then you will have to go through and run that daily attendance calculation. So if it's gone through and you've got mixtures of unexcused and absences, typically they're going to flow and be the same. But if not, if you've got they're here one period, not here one period, here one period, not here one period, then what you would want to do is at the end of the day, and this is best practice and something that I recommend to people do anyway, is inside of the attendance setting, there is this under attendance reports, the daily attendance calculation. I could say, hey, take for today's date, November 4th, and find anybody who might be out of sync or know to run it on your remote. So like right here, I know that Wednesday's got a mismatch. She's got a present code when there's a tardy, when she's had that checkout right here. So if you had where it was the end of the day, you would see those run over and you could submit. Now this also means for districts who have been hand moving their daily codes or haven't been keeping their daily codes in sync because you've had remote schools, you can now go in, run this daily attendance calculation, and it'll go across both sets of the day. Now to show you what that looks like with some check-ins and check-outs, let's go back here. I'm going to go into Wednesday. Let's go to the modify attendance. And let's say that it is Wednesday and we're going to do a checkout. So maybe this student comes to us at the end of first period and they're going to leave for the rest of the day to go to a doctor's appointment. So I can say clock out. I'm going to clock them out at, let's say, 10 o'clock. And that is enough of the scheduled period to be an absence code. So let's say they told us that they're going to a doctor, or maybe it's a parent excuse, whatever you're going to use, and that, yeah, I want to fill that to the subsequent periods. I'm going to hit save. So when I do, that writes these periods. Now, again, it does not write to the period over at the remote school. So when the remote teacher goes to take attendance, if you have that plugin, you'll be able to see they were written here, or either they'll say, hey, Wednesday's not here, mark them absent. It will then, when you hit submit, and again, when that teacher hits submit, it will look at the percent of time and it will say here, this student across all the periods, remember now including all of those, it's not 338, it's 358. It looks and gives you the right code. So again, they've missed over the 49% for the whole day, which is going to give them that absence code, and it pushes that PE to the daily side. So instead of looking at just the 308 minutes, it is now looking across all the 358 minutes in that total schedule to give that daily attendance calculation. All right, I had a couple of questions. Will the students show up on the truancy dashboard at both schools or just the students' homeschool? Bradley, that would depend on what truancy dashboard you're using. If you are using the Aurora plugin, I'm not sure about that. You would have to ask. Typically, it's going to be dependent on what you're looking at, whether it's meeting or daily. And typically, you want that at the enrollment school. So everything with this is configuring the daily code at the enrollment school, not at the remote school. Daniel, we are using simple discipline to identify truancy issues. They look at meeting only and not daily and then calculate it on their end. If we change the way we are set up, not cross LEA, will this new feature break their calculation? So Daniel, it's not going to change what they're looking at because this is just a function to write a daily code. It shouldn't impact that at all with what simple discipline is doing. Sir, if the remote enrollment is at the very first period of the day and that class lives on the bell schedule for the remote school, is there anything the base school needs to do for that student's daily attendance or let the minutes calculate the status? Sarah, there shouldn't be anything you do. So as that's taken, it should write that overall amount of time. And as you go through the rest of the day and the teachers take attendance, it's going to just do it automatically for you. So hopefully this is going to correct a lot of the back and forth communication that y'all had to have happen between the remote school and the base school. It is huge for a lot of districts. I saw that coming from a district that had an alternative school that was constantly having to have a Google Doc and letting people know back and forth. I will say the one thing that will be huge is if you are a remote school, having that plugin that I mentioned, the record meeting attendance helper, it's out there on the community. Having that installed so they can see those codes from the other school will help tremendously. I'm at a remote site. 6 schools in my district are remotely enrolled. Students turn in their absences to the high schools. Is there a way for that to carry over to the remote site? So like I said, we can't push codes over there, but you can see what they were. And when they put those codes in at the base school, it will give the overall daily code correctly for that enrollment school, which is what the state is looking at. Marcy, if a student has a first period at the remote school and checks in late, their tardy isn't showing up on PSCB attendance reports for the homeschool. Will this fix that issue? So, Marcy, we'd have to look. That PSCB report's not one that we have coded, so I'm not sure about that one. I'd have to look at it. And remember, if you process a check-in or check-out at, let's say, the remote school, that check-in, check-out does not write back as far as a check-in or a code at the home school, but the number of minutes that are needed to get that overall day is what moves. And honestly, at the base school, that's all they should care about, is it calculating the number of minutes inside of there. This will help with all check-ins and check-outs. So let's go over to Mickey, who's got another. And let's look at some of the changes with that daily attendance calculation. So again, if I am doing check-ins and check-outs, so let's on Tuesday, let's say that I do a clock in. Let's say we've got a kid that comes in a little late, 8:34 a.m. So that's going to be a tardy code for first period. And let's say they brought an excuse, and we're going to take it. Tardy excuse. Save. So again, all it's going to do is take that code. It's going to take that number of minutes. And when I hit submit, I look at Tuesday, tomorrow, and it says, hey, I'm going to move it from a present code to that tardy. But again, looking at the overall minutes. If that student didn't show up, like maybe it's the last period of the day and the student does not, show up over to that remote enrollment school. So let's submit this. If it were Tuesday and they were to mark them absent, then again, when I run that daily attendance calculation, I would see that and it would update those percentages over on the overall base school screen. Now, just to show you that other update where it was the field trip school activity kind of example, you know how when we, like we said, when we have those Friday night football games and the football team, I just use this as a main example. I promise I'm not biased just to football teams, volleyball team. Maybe it's the volleyball team's going to a competition or the band's going to a competition, and you have to mark them as school activity or field trip. If I were to go in here and say, okay, Mickey's going to be missing this class for school activity third and fourth period. Notice there's not a check-in or check-out. Previously, when you had these kind of situations, it would not write that code over to the daily side because it just saw 0 minutes missing, which is a present. But if you want to set up like I did in that original screen that I showed you as an essay and hit submit, it will now take that and change the daily code to an SA. So that is that change right there. And I would submit. Now, that other checkbox that I showed you, which was bypass the admin, if you want the program just to do its thing and not even show that screen that I just showed you to your administrators, if you check that box, that's exactly what it'll do. It'll just make that stuff work and you don't have to see that screen and don't have to hit submit. So 2 choices for you. Amanda, if we clock in or out at the remote school, will the base school teacher see the same thing listed in the absences in their Power Teacher? Absolutely, and let me show you that. So which one of these did I clock in? Not this one. So let's do that. Let's pretend that today this student had either one. You could do clock in or clock out. It doesn't matter. So let's say I do a clock out at 10 o'clock a.m. So 10 o'clock is going to be during second period. They're going to miss enough to be absent in second period at this base school. So let's say I do doctor's note. And I want to fill the rest of the day because I happen to know Mickey's going to get his wisdom teeth taken out or something like that. And we've got something from a doctor. So I'm going to hit save. It goes through the rest of the day. I'm going to hit submit. Okay. So here is my change that I made because it was, unexcused where I was playing with it. And now I'm going to this DE. So I hit submit here to get that daily code over there. Now let's go back over to the teacher portal and log in as that remote teacher. So if I look at this screen, pretending that I hadn't seen, Mickey, that we're in real time, I would see it would come over as nothing like considered present, but I would see here that that student was marked out for the rest of the day. And maybe I would go, oh, well, I know Mickey's out. So the only thing the teacher can see is unexcused. Now, if you're needing that code to be updated to this, that's where the front office would kind of have to have some conversation and make that happen at the remote school. But that will write everything. So now I know that Mickey is out there. And if I come back over here and refresh, where I'm going to see that at is here, that yes, they were present here, checked out here, absent, and then I can see down here that, yep, they got 0 minutes for a total, which would then, be the 44%. That would mark that over there. So again, it does not write the code for them, but you can get it to display because again, there is no way for us to move these codes back and forth, but we can get the time to calculate that overall daily code to be right. So what we've got to make sure is that in the districts that you have those teachers, and I know, y'all, if I had a way to make sure teachers took attendance correctly, we would all be living on a beach in Malibu right now because we could retire. But there is no way I can use technology to force a teacher to take attendance. I wish there was. So you kind of have to stay on the teachers and making sure they are taking that attendance period by period. In the base school or in each school, if they have multiple periods, once the first teacher of the day takes it, it will write that to the rest of them in that school, and the daily attendance calculation will look across all of those to get the daily code correct. Russ, what if the student is remotely enrolled all day, such as an alternative school? If the total number of instructional minutes is different between the homeschool and remote school, is that a problem? No, Russ, because that's just going to mean that that's the entirety of that student day is whatever it is at that remote school. That's where y'all do have to make sure that, you know, the number of minutes in a day constitute instructional day, all that kind of fun stuff that's outside of the scope of PowerSchool, but it is not a problem that the number of minutes is different in one school versus another. Just know that it's looking all the way across all of them. And again, in Russ's case that he just made, so let's pretend Mickey had no classes at the high school, okay? Absolutely no classes. All of his classes was at the remote school. Remember, that code's never going to pull over. So in this case, it would be very important that that high school, in this case, run this daily attendance calculation. And it's something that takes 2 seconds to run at the end of each day when all the attendance has been taken, because what it will do is it will look at all of the schools, both at the high school and at that remote school, to see has anybody had any attendance taken where we don't have a daily code. And what this will do is write all of the daily codes over to the home school for each one of those kids at the remote school. Does that make sense to everyone? And really, guys, that's all there is to this update right here. So if I had a student that was completely over at that enrollment school, as that remote enrollment school takes all the attendance and gets it period by period, check-ins, whatever, then just make sure that your base schools, and y'all know if in your district y'all got a heavy remote school or not. Some schools don't have any remote and don't even have to pay any attention to this update right here. But those who kind of are living and breathing by those remote schools, for example, alternative schools where maybe your kid is all the way over there, or you've got a remote school that is your virtual school or virtual program. Y'all have all kind of nice names for some of these schools, but you'll make sure that that is in there. And then at the end of the day, you just need to make sure that your registrars or whoever's at the base schools run this daily attendance calculation so that it catches up the daily code on any of those that were entered at the remote school during the day. Can you explain the bypass admin verification option once more? Absolutely. So if I'm going to go back to my attendance. So the bypass, oh, can't talk today, admin verification. If I check this box, what happens is I will show you. I'll go back to Mickey. So I'm going to go in here to Mickey Mouse. And I'm going to do a checkout on Wednesday. So let's say Mickey comes in and clocks out at 1:43. They've only missed 1 minute of this period, so they're tardy, excused, save, and they're going to be absent here for parent excuse because they're doing something. Okay. So I put this in. Now, remember what happens typically. Without that box checked, when I hit submit, it usually gives me that screen and tells you, hey, the present code was this, and now it's moving this, hit submit to write it through. Well, when you turn that on, what it does is that it just does all the work, doesn't even show them to give them the option to not select it, because one of our biggest issues we have in troubleshooting attendance is we'll have people say, hey, the daily code's not writing over, and come to find out people are like bypassing that screen and not hitting submit, or they're clicking the X out to not do it. This takes that option away, and it just makes the daily code right over there altogether. So it takes off one click if you don't want them to see that screen, knowing that if I go over to the daily side, I am still going to see those codes. It's still going to write those codes for me. I just don't have to see that screen. It just lets it happen. If office personnel has not been completing the daily attendance calculation, what should they do? So you can run it at any time. As the year starts, and some people like go back and run it, a couple of times a week or a month. It does not matter. If I needed to go back, let's say to the beginning of school, because I need to know, are my daily calculations out of sync for anyone? And again, if you are a school that uses remote enrollments, I highly suggest just starting from week 1 and let's go through. So if I go here to, and I will say this, Lorenzo's working at trying to make this where we can run it for more than 2 weeks at a time. He's working on some performance issues. So let's say I want to run it from August 1st to August 18th. August. Let's choose that again. So the 1st up to the 15th. Let's get 2 weeks. I wonder if it's going to go ahead and let me do 3. Oh, he might have already made the changes. It did. He's made the changes. We can do it for more than 2 weeks. Some of y'all are like praising on that. So it looks like he said it where we can run it for 45 days at a time. It will show me if I've had any mismatches. It'll show me if I have any mismatches at all. And here I have some ISSs that's trying to set to present. Now, why is it doing that when it was automatically writing it to begin with? Well, because I used that new function here. Oops, school management. Let's go back into our attendance preferences. One of my codes that I most definitely want to use is ISS. I want any period, not double quote, but single quote. I definitely want ISS to write. So now let me come back over here and run that one more time. There we go. Now they match. It'll show you. So, Dr. Matthews, you can run this at any time, and I would say go back and look and see if you have any mismatches where maybe somebody has overridden that screen or told it to ignore a change that should have been made. But here's the thing. You don't want to fight this screen because it is legitimately telling you, hey, these kids have missed some time. Here's my percent absent column right here. And if you have missed any time, you should have something other than a present code over in here. And it will look at that threshold of 49%. That's our state admin in law is that they have to, be there 51% of the time, which means they can only miss 49% of the time. Anything lower than that, that's not 0, should have a tardy. Anything above that should have an absence code. It is looking at those rules and looking across the amount of time that you have a present or absent code in the individual meetings to give you that overall day's calculation. And it will put that code in the daily code for you. Robert, does a mass update attendance still only update the meeting side? So if you are trying to use, and there's a lot of confusion, so I'm glad you asked that, Robert. If you are trying to use group functionality of mass change attendance, 1, be super careful with it. But 2, it does not write back and forth to each other. So there is a meeting and a daily tab up here. If you choose to use this to push meeting attendance, you can do one of 2 things, Robert. You can push meeting, that's what it defaults to, and then run the daily attendance calculation to update the daily side, or you run it for meeting and then click this button up here to then run it for daily. It's up to you how you want to do it. But yes, it still just does one thing, and we left this purposefully in case people needed to go in and just do a meeting change that does not impact daily. So running this mass attendance, if I were to mark, everybody out for all 4 periods on this side, on the meeting side of this, it is not going to write it to the daily record automatically. But if I run that daily attendance calculation, it will reconcile everything. So for example, let's just show it. Let's pull all my 11th graders. I'm going to mark every 11th grader absent today. So how do I mark them absent in mass? So I'm going to say select all periods. And even if you're not running all these periods, it's going to find what's in the schedule. Codes to scan for, well, I'm going to leave this, all. So I don't care if they were marked present or absent. I want to write all of these codes to be school activity. Because the whole 11th grade just went on a field trip today. They all went to Auburn University for engineering day or something. And I'm going to hit submit. And that's a lot of codes to write because I'm writing this to about 300 kids right now, maybe 400. I don't remember. So let's give it a second. Okay. There's my daily attendance screen. And it's going to say, hey, all of these kids just got their meeting changed. So now I need the daily attendance calculation to be able to submit. So do I want to change all of these to school activity? Well, yes, I do. So I hit submit. Oh, and now I've got security violations. Got to figure out about that one. But I could come back here. That might be a bug that we hadn't seen in that screen, but I should be able to do it from here. If I run this daily attendance calculation now for today's date, it should show me they're all out of sync, unless it actually worked in that daily, yep, there we go. Let me send that one to Lorenzo because we did not look at that one. We'll be good there. So that's a bug. So we'll have an update coming out for that one. Is there a way to do mass checkouts or check-ins on time instead of periods, such as leaving on a field trip mid-class time? So, thank you, whoever just said we lost your screen. All right, can y'all see it again now? Perfect. All right, so Penny, if they are leaving for a field trip, you do not want to process a check-in or check-out, even if they leave in the middle of the period, because that's going to take minutes away from their schedule. If you do a check-in or check-out, you do not want to do that on a present code because that takes minutes off the schedule and will make them count as if they are actually absent. So you don't want to do it in your situation that you are describing. However, Lorenzo was very close to having our code almost there to do our mass check-ins and check-out. So that is still coming, not quite ready yet, but that should be the next biggest update that we have to push out. This was the next one in our queue, but mass checkouts are coming next and check-ins. Our students go half day to career tech morning or afternoon. If they clock out at 10:50 before they go to tech for a doctor's appointment and the office codes them doctor's excuse, at tech, the teacher will need to code their absences to DE also so that it won't push UA to the remaining part of the day due to the minutes and cause the UA to overwrite the DE already coded by the base school. Does that make sense? So it's not going to take, so even if that remote school pushes a UA, it's not going to overwrite what was at the base school pushing that DE over there. However, you are correct in that you want that code to be over there. So you might want to have the consideration in your district of, do you want to allow those teachers to use those other codes so that they can match what was entered in at the homeschool or not? Or do they need to just because the teacher will see it, do they need to let the front office at the remote school know, hey, I need this code to actually be a DE because that's what it was at the base school? Y'all kind of need to have that conversation to see which way you want to go with that. But it will not automatically override anything. Any other questions from anyone? Yes, and that's where that conversation will need to be had is, do you want to open up those other codes for the teachers to be able to choose them at the remote school so that they can match what's been entered at the home school, or do you want them to just notify the office at the remote school so that they can then update the code to match? Okay. Penny, can we get the date on the meeting attendance screen to stay after each entry? Can we get the day on the meeting attendance? You talking about this screen, Penny? Or are you talking on like this individual student record? Because I can tell you this one will always default to, yeah, it's always going to default to current day. Unfortunately, I don't know that there's anything we can do to kind of change that up. You just kind of have to click here and go back. And I guess maybe it's where you're going in and looking at code from previous days to put in notes and things like that that they bring in the day after. Yeah, one of the things, let's see, if I go back to Friday, if you are using the flyout to enter it here, say I know that he was absent, and then all of a sudden he brings in a note, a doctor, say all, save. If you do it from there, let's see, that's updating. Does it go back? Yeah, it's going to go back there because we're bypassing and going back to that other screen. So yeah, unfortunately that one, not going to help on that one. If I were to do open in a tab, it's just going to go to the overview. Let me do some thinking on that, Penny. See if there's anything. I don't know that there is, but I will definitely investigate to see if there's something we can do to have it default back. Any other questions for anyone? So remember, biggest updates are putting in what present code you want to be able to write down. And now the number of minutes will go across all scheduled periods on there. All right, I'm going to stop the recording right quick.